My February newsletter focused on organizational resilience and adaptability. This is really important for our organization's success and for us as leaders and employees and for our success and growth. McKinsey did a study fairly recently after the COVID pandemic and looked at an organization's ability to weather that pandemic. And they looked at resilient behaviors, and the organizations that had set up resilient type of behaviors before the pandemic were 30% likely to declare bankruptcy after the pandemic. But the organizations who did not have those resiliency behaviors and cultures implemented in their organizations had a 75% chance of declaring bankruptcy within 2 years after the pandemic. So a really big difference. Hopefully, we're not going to have another pandemic, but I think what we can all confidently say is that change and disruption is an ongoing part of our lives and the context in which our organizations function. So how can we become more resilient? So there's a couple things. We can focus less on short-term planning and results. And that means resisting the urge to rely on tried and trusted processes and heuristics. So, these are our norms and our ways of doing things for decision making. These are the processes that we follow, which can serve us really well for being efficient and cost conscious. But we can get a little bit locked into that. And then when a disruption comes, it's harder to step out of that. So yes, focus on getting results, but it'll be a little bit more nimble and flexible with the processes and the heuristics that we have in place to support that. If we're not focusing on short-term results, what are we focusing on? We're still focusing on results, but alongside that, we're also looking at our employees' development. So as leaders, we're looking at how is my team developing and what's my team culture? There's a great McKinsey article that looks at organizations. They studied those that are focused on just performance, those that are focused on just people, those that are focused on neither, and then, of course, those that are focused on both people and performance. And they found that last group, the people and performance, I call dual focus, that they consistently over time had better profitability, higher revenue growth, and were more consistent in their likelihood of outperforming their competition over a period of time. And they looked at that kind of leading into and during the pandemic, but then also after as well. So creating space for learning and development alongside getting those results. Part of that learning is also, as leaders, encouraging ourselves, but our teams to take risks and learn from those mistakes. So creating a team culture that is psychologically safe so that we can experiment and fail and then individually and collectively learn from that failure. As leaders, we need to coach our employees. So instead of always providing them with answers, asking questions, which means we're creating space for them to come up with their own solutions, which means that they're growing and learning and adapting. And finally, as leaders, we need to make space for personal connections. Often we can get a little bit caught up with being a leader and a professional, and sometimes it is really important to put that guard down and to connect on a human level. And that's especially important if you're working in a hybrid or a remote way, to create the space to move past the barrier of the lens and get to know each other on a more human level. So all of this comes together, what I call my lead with learning approach. And that really focuses on having a learning mindset, which is bits that I've sprinkled and talked about already, as well as having a team culture of learning. So if we focus on those two things as leaders and with our teams, then we can build more resilience and more adaptability in our teams and ourselves and in our organizations.